into a brilliant, kind of deceptively simple poem by the legendary W.B. Yeats. It's called For Anne Gregory. And it basically tackles this massive question human beings have been agonizing over for centuries. We're going to pull apart its core arguments to see how this classic piece of writing connects straight to how we view ourselves and, honestly, how we view each other today.
Right off the bat, here's the heavy hitter. Can you be loved for yourself alone? I mean, it's a huge question, isn't it? This is the universal philosophical debate at the absolute heart of our explainer today. We all desperately want to believe that our core identity, our soul, our personality, the real us, is what makes us lovable. But there's this constant, undeniable tension between internal worth and physical attraction. Like, does the packaging matter more than what's actually inside? Yeats takes this incredibly massive question and just distills it into this brilliant, compact little poem.
Okay, so let's get into Section 1, A Conversation with Anne. To really dig into this debate, Yeats sets up a direct, slightly tense conversation between a young man and a young woman, who we can safely assume is Anne herself. Just listen to the young man's opening argument here. He says, "Never shall a young man, thrown into despair by those great honey-colored ramparts at your year, love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair." He's basically telling Anne, right to her face, that her physical beauty, specifically her stunning blonde or honey-colored hair, is so overwhelmingly attractive that it's literally a barrier. Men are just so distracted by her looks that they are completely incapable of seeing or loving the real her.
And the way he illustrates this is just brilliant. Look at the use of the word ramparts. If you think about it, ramparts are those high, super wide defensive walls built around a castle or a fort. Picture the massive, imposing ramparts of the Red Fort. Yeats is using this absolutely stunning visual metaphor here. He's literally comparing Anne's yellow hair falling around her ears to defensive walls. Her beauty is a fortress, and it's blocking any man from getting inside to love her true self. Basically, her physical perfection is practically keeping her trapped. Crazy, right?
But Anne? She doesn't just sit there and accept this. She fights back with a totally pragmatic and honestly pretty humorous rebuttal. If her blonde hair is the big problem, well, she's got a quick fix. She declares she can just go get some hair dye. She literally offers to dye her hair brown, black, or even carrot, meaning orange. Her whole argument is that by deliberately making herself less conventionally attractive, or just changing her most striking feature, these supposedly despairing young men will finally be forced to look past her physical appearance. She's desperately trying to take the whole physical equation right out of the romance, so she can be loved for herself alone.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Divine Verdict.
So, we've got the young man's deep cynicism up against Anne's youthful optimism. Then, the crucial point gets delivered by an old religious man who suddenly introduces a completely new perspective to settle the debate once and for all. He claims he found a text to prove that only God, my dear, could love you for yourself alone and not your yellow hair. Wow, it is a stark, absolute conclusion. Yeats is basically asserting that human beings are fundamentally flawed and just inherently tied to the physical world. As mortals, our love is inescapably tangled up in physical appearance. That kind of unconditional, purely spiritual love, loving someone strictly for their soul, entirely separated from their yellow hair, that is a divine trait. It's reserved strictly for God.
Now, before we really unpack the real-world implications of all this, let's quickly ground the poem by looking at the genius mind behind it. William Butler Yeats lived from 1865 to 1939. Educated in Dublin and London, the guy was a deeply influential figure. He was an Irish nationalist, profoundly interested in folklore and mythology, and you can see how those elements constantly bled into his poetry. His sheer ability to weave these super deep philosophical truths into such beautiful rhythmic verses, yeah, that's exactly why he won the Nobel Prize for Literature back in 1923.
When you look at the complete text of For Anne Gregory, it really just highlights that beautiful thematic arc we just walked through. You can clearly see the three distinct stanzas. You've got the young man's opening despair over human nature, then Anne's pragmatic, quick-fix attempt to change herself, and finally the religious man's ultimate divine resolution. It's basically a perfect three-act play about the limitations of human love, and it's all contained within just 18 lines. Incredible.
Moving on to Section 3, Objects versus People. Okay, now that we've got a solid grip on the poem itself, let's apply its central theme to our own modern lives. Because this source material really challenges us to think deeply about how we assign value, specifically when we're navigating the difference between objects and people. Think about it. When we look at objects, a flashy car, the newest phone, a gorgeous dress, we value them entirely based on very specific external qualities. We desire them for their features.
If we want to sell an object, what do? We emphasize those physical traits. But what about people? Do we love others simply because we like their specific qualities? Whether that's physical, like Anne's hair, or even mental? Is it genuinely, actually possible to love someone for themselves alone? Or are some people just inherently more lovable than others based on their traits? Let's break this down a bit further.
Let's think about the different ways we all experience love. Do the quote-unquote rules of attraction change depending on the actual relationship? Let's talk about family first. A parent's love for a newborn baby, or maybe a physically challenged child, is very often seen as the absolute closest thing we have to unconditional love, loving someone strictly for themselves alone. But then contrast that with the public's love for, say, a huge film star or a prominent politician. That kind of love is highly conditional. It's often entirely based on their physical appearance or their public performance. Then, of course, we have our personal connections, right? Like a brother or your best friend. And don't forget the pure affection between an owner and a pet. So ask yourself, in which of these dynamics does appearance actually matter the most? And where does it matter the least?
The source material also really challenges us to reflect on the actual timeline of these relationships. Because, let's face it, physical appearances inevitably change over the years. Hair goes gray, wrinkles form, people change how they dress or just how they carry themselves. So you have to ask yourself, as a friend or a family member has naturally changed physically over the years, has your relationship with them changed in tandem? Or does that deep, internal connection stay completely steady even as the yellow hair inevitably fades away?
Which leads us nicely into Section 4, separating dancer from dance. So, we've pretty firmly established that humans are beautifully complex, and we absolutely cannot just be treated as objects, valued purely for superficial qualities, right? But, at the exact same time, we are undeniably physical beings. So I really want to ask you directly, is it truly possible to completely separate a person from how they look, how they sound, and how they walk? Seriously, picture your absolute best friend right now. Can you untangle their core inner identity from the exact sound of their laugh, or the specific funny way they gesture when they're telling a story, or just the physical presence they bring into a room? Those physical traits are literally the vehicle through which we experience their soul.
All of which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative thought, actually derived from Yeats's broader philosophy. How can we separate the dancer from the dance? If the inner self is the dancer, and this physical body we walk around in is the dance, can you ever really have one without the other? Can you truly be loved for yourself alone, completely stripped of all physical form? It is a mesmerizing question, and it's exactly why For Anne Gregory is going to stay relevant for as long as human beings continue to fall in love. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it sparked a totally new way of looking at both literature and, honestly, your own life.